It is January 23rd, the coldest day of the year, and special meeting here. It is 7:32. Has the meeting been officially warned?
Yes.
Thank you. First item up for business here this morning is public participation. Opportunity for you to speak about anything other than the two items that are on our agenda here this morning. And we'll give you 2 minutes. Obviously, everybody's here for the two items on our agenda. First up, skating rink.
Okay. Carol Lott's here to talk about the compressor replacement. And we talked about that. 2 compressors went out over a week ago now. And she's just going to give you an update on that, although not really much has changed.
Just the weather.
Yeah.
Probably the compressors are not working that hard this morning here, this weather that we're having. Really, as Barb just stated, there's not a lot that has changed. I did have a conversation, had a meeting with American Refrigeration just to kind of look at the whole process and see what has been, what we have, what the issues are, the pros and cons of repair, replace, and upgrade. And after a lengthy discussion, the recommendation is that we upgrade the 60 and 100 horsepower compressors, to a more technology-based system that will work with the plate frame. So I guess.
With that, the price is actually, we still have the same estimate of $172. Had a question with regard to the finances of the skating rink. Expenditures for the rink are shown in the general fund. Revenue is divided between the general fund revenue and the skating rink improvement fund. That fund was created when the rink itself was enclosed. It was created by the select board at that time. Over the last 5 years, on average, we take in the general fund about $8,000 more than is expended. Obviously, that's just the average. And about $24,000, or about 20% of the money, goes into the skate improvement fund. The last several improvements at that, with the dasher boards, the chiller barrel replacement, and now, as proposed today, the compressors are, while the initial loans or bonds may be held by the town, those notes are repaid by the skating improvement fund. So this is a user fee-based program. And with that, at this point, what we're looking for here is just a motion to approve utilizing up to $172,000 of unassigned fund balance from the general fund, with the intention for the purchase of the new compressors, with the repayment over up to a 10-year period by the skating improvement fund. That will actually then be an article that you'll put on the warning next year. So it's basically, at this point, we're just looking for those instructions, and then they will come back as an article next week for the representative town meeting warning.
Can I ask some questions now before a motion is made?
Go ahead.
Barb's summary about the revenue, about the cost structure for running the skating rink arose because of an inquiry I had about whether it's self-sustaining and whether user fees cover all the costs for the skating rink, including the expenses of these upgrades. And I wonder if you can just give us a general explanation of how much revenue is generated annually by the skating rink, and with more specific explanation of where it's allocated to. Just very, I mean...
Very general.
Yeah,
Very general.
General, but...
Do you know the numbers? Because I just looked at them.
Yeah, if you want...
The numbers are, it's approximately revenue, and again, it varies from year to year, obviously, range from about 100, total revenue taken in is about 115,000 up to about 130,000. And each year about 20% or so, about 20, anywhere between 20 and 25,000 goes into the skating rink improvement fund. The majority of the revenue from the rink is actually rink rental revenue,
Right.
as opposed to
Daily admissions.
daily admissions.
Yeah, so the rink rental meaning coming from the renter groups, the VUHS, boys and ice hockey teams, the Brattleboro Hockey Association, the adult groups, the women's hockey, the men's hockey, the hockey, figure skating, winter sports program. We have 14 different different schools that utilize the rink in the afternoons between 12:30 and 2:30 for winter sports program, different days, different schools. And then the public skaters, and today I think we've had over 10,000 this season alone visitors at that skating.
Do you know about how much we pay in wages, just total number in the budget, to run the skating rink?
I can tell you that I have a budget to operate the facility for heat, electric, operational supplies. You know, this budget year is about 90,000.
And that includes all of the personnel costs as well?
It does not include, it includes all the people that we hire, but it does not include like our full-times, because we don't allocate our full-time staff between programs. So it doesn't include, Carol's time, it doesn't include Paul Ethier's time.
So it's approximately, it's self-sustaining except for the administration costs?
Correct.
All right.
The full-time staff that are working in there.
Right.
Cashiers, guards, that's all included.
When you last were here, you wondered whether the plate and frame replacement led to the need for the new compressors. Has that been confirmed one way or another? Your memo says that the existing compressors look like they're for refrigerators, not for, if I'm reading it correctly, and not for skating rink.
Yeah, we're talking with American. You know, there's the older technology and the newer technology, and I could not get a direct answer. I did not get an answer that they could not say, yes, Carol, that caused your problem. Believe me, I asked the question, and I asked it 3 or 4 different ways, and I got the same answer each way that I asked it. You know, what the explanation, the long and the short of that explanation is the technology that we had before with the chiller barrel and the compressors was the technologies of the 70s. You know, now we're moving through, and those compressors are more of an HVAC, and now and what they're using to operate facilities now, more of an industrial compressor, and that the reciprocating, and that's the direction that we will be going this time. But they did not.
I'm going to keep asking if that's okay. Chiller barrel and plate and frame are different things?
There are different things.
Can you tell us what role does the chiller barrel and the plate and frame play?
They do this. Okay, they do the same thing. Okay, they do the same thing except for different technology. You know, chiller barrels are these little tubes that run underneath the compressors that cool down the refrigerant as it goes out into the 10 miles of piping that we have in the skating, underneath the slab of the skating rink, and then then it comes back in layman's terms.
And plate and frame?
Similar thing, different technology.
Is there something else that's anticipated to break in the next 3 or 4 years as a result of the plate and frame and the new compressors?
It's a good question, because of the question I also asked. So
Very good
there's-
question.
So,
There's one more component that in all of this refrigeration process, and that's the condenser. And they do not feel with this technology that that's going to have an effect on the condenser. But I need to tell you that the condenser is 20 years old and has a life expectancy of about 30 years old. So I do need to, we're talking about a facility that's close to 40 years old here.
And we just did the chiller barrels a couple of years ago.
In the fall of 2009.
so we have both chiller barrels and plate and frame, and they do the same thing? Is
We
that?
have chiller barrels that don't function, that will, when the facility was built in the 70s, they call it skid will come in. The skid came in with a chiller barrel underneath with these two compressors on top of it. Okay, those two were, at the time, purchased and designed to function together. As time changed from the mid-70s to where we are today, chiller barrels are, as the American Refrigeration, they said, we can't even tell you other facilities that we're running into these in areas that we maintain. So people are going away from the chiller barrel to the plate and frame, and as time is going on, you're having to upgrade your compressors.
Good?
I'd be glad to take you on tour.
I just want to know if we have both systems in place and one is functional, one is not, or both are working.
No, they are not. No, when the plate and frame was put in, it was piped to, so you're no longer using the chiller barrel. It just.
But the chiller barrel remained in the
But
thing
it's still
because
there.
it's so huge.
Yeah, it's still there because
and it's
not-
part of the compressors.
Exactly. It's not something that you can say, let's take the chiller because it's all a package.
If you go and look at it, you don't really see the chiller barrel.
Right.
You see the compressors.
Because it's underneath.
You should go look at it.
Yeah,
It's
I guess.
big.
You know, I'm
Making
sure I'll be
noise.
impressed.
And you get to talk to
Giuseppe.
Giuseppe, which is just fun to say his name.
You remember him?
Yes, I took both Barb and Dick went on the chiller barrel tour.
That's right.
Right.
Giuseppe.
Giuseppe. Yes, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, hey Carol, we're talking capital here, and I'm wondering what other capital expenses you see on the horizon here that, if we're talking about Giuseppe, I think we got to talk about Zamboni too.
They're not related. They might be cousins.
Well, maybe we should be talking about jacuzzi. Can you give us a little idea about the other pieces of capital equipment and where the prospect of a need for replacement comes in, so that we can just see what the timeline looks like and graph it out in our minds?
Right, and some of these items are in the capital plan.
Okay.
Yeah. The Zamboni is 21 years old. And is going to be up for replacement in the next couple of years.
It is.
It's on the
It
capital
is.
plan for next year.
Oh, okay.
It is in the
Yep,
capital
yep.
plan.
I see.
Yeah.
Can I get a ride on it before we replace it? Just
No, you
kidding.
want to ride on the new one. The old one's.
Okay.
And that will cost you.
Yeah.
And that will cost you.
Yeah, what,
Fundraising.
Just
You get a discount on the old one, premium on the new.
Just so the Zamboni is the next big piece of equipment that she has. There had been some. She had in the capital plan kind of extensive lighting upgrades. Those are actually done already.
Yes, 'cause we were able to get a grant for that.
They were able to get a grant through Efficiency Vermont to do the replacement of those. And so the next big one is the Zamboni, and other than that, until you get to the condenser, which I'm not even sure how much that would be, but other than that, we pretty much have replaced most things in the skating rink. Just so that people are aware as well, quite a bit of the funding, both for the replacement of the chiller barrel, of the dasher boards, and then we would hope with the compressor, is also funded through grants. Carol's gotten grants. She's gotten donations for the dasher boards. However, typically going out for donations for something like a replacement of a mechanical piece that nobody sees isn't really where you're going to get your most donations. Now that is different from the Zamboni, which everybody sees and is just kind of cool. So So that's just the other piece, is to let people know as well that the motion will be for a representative town meeting will be to use up to 172 for a time of up to 10 years in the event that she's successful in some grants. And she's already actually putting money, putting applications in for this compressor.
Excuse me?
I said, of course you are.
So I think that wraps up most of it.
May I?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So condenser is not a piece of today's puzzle?
It is
No.
not feasible, no.
But when would you do expect to need to
I mean,
replace
that's,
that?
again, in the capital plan out a ways. I mean, that it's anticipated that's going to last another 10 years, and that, and a 10-year capital plan, you'll see that out there.
Okay.
It's about 2/3 of his life has been utilized. It doesn't make sense when there's still a third left to replace it at this point,
And-
as long as it's working with the upgraded mechanics.
And those are the questions that have already been asked, and I've been told there's no reason why that should not, those two should not be replaced.
This is Zamboni breaking down, and does it need to be replaced, or are we going to be able to get 5 years of life out of it?
I don't think we're going to get 5 years of life out of it. You know, it's like any 20-year-old vehicle, you start to have issues. Do I think we can get a couple more years out of it? Probably a couple more years. 5 years, that would be stretching it. But as Barb said, that is definitely something that we can put our hands on to have a lot of fundraising.
Well, I have questions related to the budget, but I was thinking we should probably do both.
All right, so I move to allocate and expend up to $172,000 from the
Unassigned
unassigned
fund balance.
fund balance to replace the compressors at the skating rink. I move actually to put an article onto the town meeting warning authorizing expenditure of up to $172,000 from the unassigned fund balance to replace compressors at the skating rink.
Discussion?
To be repaid from the skating rink improvement fund in a period not to exceed 10 years.
Discussion. Dora?
So, from a budgetary standpoint, we're talking about taking this from the unassigned fund balance. We're talking about borrowing
Against ourselves?
against ourselves for the police fire station design process. How does this extra expenditure figure into the general fund budget?
At this point, we don't anticipate, because again, with the police fire that will be repaid in July, we don't know until Carol hears back from some grants. We're not exactly sure of the total amount, but we feel that there's enough in the unassigned that there is enough cash that it won't make, it'll be fine.
How much money is in the fund for the skating
The
fund?
improvement fund?
The skating improvement fund at this point?
It's about $75,000, Sean?
Yeah. Are you looking at using that whole amount or a piece of it?
No, we would, pay out over a yearly, because we're also paying on the Clayton Frank Chiller Barrel upgrade, we're paying on the dasher boards. So, no, we wouldn't be just...
It would be a loan that would probably be done as even amounts over a course of
10 years.
10 years, up to 10 years.
Is there reason to consider this year, given this new expense, building an increase in fees for next year into the budget, or has that already happened?
Every year we take that per hour rental fee goes up $5 a year. And that, when you take that out, when you say an hour, it seems like a small amount, but when you spread that out, it's fairly large. So we're already increasing.
Good.
I'd like to say that I think that it's because this is such a popular program and we have committed to it, I think that we really need to move ahead with this. And yeah, I'd rather be thinking about jacuzzis, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and gelato. But I think we ought to be voting in favor of whatever supports the Zamboni as well. So I think it's worthwhile. And this is why we have the surplus, the unspent surplus. This is why this is the rainy day.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Next up.
The ABB is here seeking approval of their FY14 budget. I'm actually going to go grab that motion.
Good morning. And welcome back.
Good to be back.
As we get ready for you to present your budget, the reason that this was turned down, because there was a significant surplus in your budget, and I do notice that it is a level funded budget in terms of revenue generated and expenditures. So having said that, I will turn it over to you, Kate. And just in case people don't know who you are, please introduce yourself before you speak.
Sure. I'm Kate O'Connor, Vice President of the ABB Board, and Bill Crowley, who's the Treasurer of the ABB
Sorry,
Board.
I'm Bill Crowley, and I'm treasurer.
And we have Andrea Littlemore, who's in the audience. First of all, I just want to let you know Donna Simons, who's our president, is somewhere warm and sunny, otherwise she would be here today. And we do appreciate your letting us come back. What we've done, and you have the budget and the summary, so I'll go quickly so you can ask us any questions that you need to. As Dick said, we have a level funded budget now. We took to heart what you folks said, and we took the assumptions out of the budget that we put in that made us have that surplus. We went through on the income side, and we took out our assumptions and actually put down what we raised in the event income pledges and sponsorships in FY12. So we're pretty sure we did it in FY12, we can do it again. We went through on the expenses side, and when we presented you the budget in last 2 weeks ago or a week ago, we had set aside the money for programs yet to be determined. What we did is we went back as a board, put the money into the programs that we heard from our members that were important to them, which was increased marketing money. We put a little bit more money into someone to help us keep our website, which we're going to sort of put more emphasis on. We put money into our cleanliness program and more money into the beautification program. And from the meetings that we heard from our members, those are the programs that were important. So that's how we came up with what we were presenting today.
Very good. I would accept a motion before we get into discussion to place the DID appropriation of $78,000 on the town warrant.
So moved.
Move to accept the $78,000 appropriation request made by Building a Better Brattleboro and to place this item on the representative town meeting warrant.
Same thing. Discussion.
I like to keep it the same, so from year to year, I know it goes.
Dora?
So I looked through the budget and I did the math on the stuff that you added in. I was having trouble finding the total $36,000. So, and is it a total $36,000, or did you reduce that based on you just using the $78,000? I'm not sure.
What we did is on the income side, we reduced, if you notice that there's less income that we're saying that we can raise. So part of that 78 went into, conceivably into the income line. Does that make sense?
If I can,
I understand that, and I was looking for it in there, except that I couldn't find the equal amount in the amount should be raised column. So what I was trying to figure out is, I saw the income was reduced, but I was trying to find the amount in the expenses, and I couldn't find it.
Because it was both in revenue and expenses.
if I could just comment, I took the unusual position of opposing the organization's budget last time, because I essentially, as the treasurer, I felt that you're cutting a director's hours by 44%. Unfortunately, the surplus was directly tied to the reduction in salary. So unfortunately, that had to be discussed. I think the unknown from the organizational standpoint is, what does a 44% reduction in time represent with regard to what can be achieved on the revenue side? I think this is a much better representation of, say, of at least not being sure of that unknown. And I think it was kind of saying, okay, you've got to concede that some things may not be achieved. It's still an unknown, but this is a more conservative approach in terms of what we will be able to do in terms on the revenue side, and some things that may have to be done on the expense side to make sure that we're achieving the objectives that the organization wants. And that's what, perhaps some of the numbers are numbers that you can't say precisely with what they're going to be, but this is truly a better representation than I think we previously presented to you. I may not have answered your question, but I think I'd have to say there is some uncertainty as to the preciseness of the numbers, but this is a better estimate than you received last time.
I know what you're saying, Dora. I think I know what you're saying. But the income that if you look at the income that we decreased it by, it's the same as, unless I'm adding it wrong, the expenses that we added back, they're both equal, if I'm hearing what you're saying. Or maybe it's too early for me to do that.
All right,
If you add the decrease in revenue with the increase in
increases in the line
expenditures, you're
items,
going to
they're
get
equal.
Right.
pretty close.
Pretty close,
Yeah.
off, a couple dollars off here
Does
and
that
there.
make sense?
Yes. Further questions? Dora?
nobody else has any questions. So, a couple of things. One is, I noticed that you increased the amount for the web consultant.
Yes.
And what I'd like to see on the end of consultant is consultants, because we've got a very diverse group of businesses down there, and one particular person may not suit the needs of everybody down there, and if we're putting the money in there, we should be thinking about a little diversity for the businesses if you really want to help them. So that's one thing. I'm a little concerned about some of these programs that have increased expenses in them, and they're programs that don't necessarily need to cost that much, like the flower program and the lights, and So I understand that those are things that you want to focus on, but there's a lot of ways to do the downtown thing, and part of that is getting volunteers to do things like the daily maintenance and all that of things. So I'm concerned that that's a little over the top on those amounts. And then to bring up the elephant in the room, there's the river garden issue. And I have concerns about the separation of the river garden, whether or not you think that you're going to divest of the river garden. One, it's owned by the organization, and in this budget, there's nothing on interest expenses for mortgage and loans. The organization has mortgages and loans on that property, and that goes with the organization. It doesn't go with the property. So I have concerns about that not being represented in this budget, because that is a piece of the organization, and whether or not you can, get rid of that building, you may not get rid of the building for the debt that you have on it. So, what's the plan for that?
Let me, before you respond, Kate, let me make something perfectly clear here, that the responsibility of the DID budget is for the organization and the DID district. It is not about property owners within the DID funding a building that the organization brought with them when they were chosen as the designated organization. So I definitely believe that it is inappropriate here, and if it has been in the past, which people have acknowledged, taking funds from building owners to sustain their buildings, I think that that has been highly inappropriate. This budget here truly reflects what the DID organization should have been doing and looks like will be doing going forward. And I actually applaud them for clearing up this misnomer of having other property owners support the organization's building. And I understand your concern. And at another venue, at another time, this will all be taken up and discussed. Here today, we are discussing the DID's appropriation of money for the downtown program. Kate, if you want to...
Well, you answered that question. I'll just talk just briefly about your concerns, Nora, about some of the beautification things that we put in here. A lot of things have been tried in the past to do these programs. And when we had our membership meeting, when we've gotten input, people have been, do volunteers. We want volunteers, don't get me wrong, that's what we really want. But there was sort of an emphasis that people put on those programs, and that's why we put so much money into it, resources.
I think that was the number one.
That was the number one thing.
Number one issue at that meeting. Dora?
Well, I guess what I'm questioning is the ways that these things can be done. I mean, I spent the day yesterday, I spent a good couple hours yesterday going on websites looking up other downtown organizations, and I can tell you that I found a number of them that are doing this all by volunteer, and they have very extensive volunteer basis among the people that they're serving. And part of the issue is all of those surveys that we were looking at the last meeting that demonstrated not such strong support in the downtown community for the organization. And so, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, I don't know, but if the organization really is dedicated to rebuilding itself and serving the downtown, that volunteer base should come. So if
We agree.
it's there's a ton of stuff. And with all due respect, Dick, I totally disagree with you on the River Garden. I think the two are totally intertwined. It's a property downtown. It's owned by the downtown organization. How you can separate the two, I don't know. But I'm going to tell you that this is from their webpage talking about the importance of the River Garden being the centerpiece of downtown. It's the centerpiece of the downtown improvement district. And to say that the two of them are separate doesn't make any sense. I mean, I agree. I understand the whole issue with the downtown improvement district, where the funding comes from, what the funding is supposed to be for. But part of the downtown improvement district is this very important piece of property. And to separate the two out doesn't make any sense.
Well, they are a private property owner. David, you had your hand up there?
had my
Looks like
hands
you're
up, but now my
sparring.
Sorry.
I've got frostbite on my back.
And I'm right next to the fan, too. I want to begin by noting how important it is to recognize the efforts of people who are working to improve our community and improve the downtown, both volunteers and people who are paid for those efforts. it's pretty clear that all of our betterment and improvement efforts need to be recognized and rely on individual commitment of both volunteers and paid people. And I didn't really come into this discussion about BABB with any particular agenda or position about BABB. I've watched the work that's been done, and I've reviewed now a second budget for BABB. And there are things that I perceive are useful from the organization, and there are questions that I have. I think it has to be said that the process as it's unfolded this year has raised a lot of concerns for me, and I think for many others. When the budget was initially presented 4 or 6 weeks ago, the public process that's required by the ordinance that authorizes the DID had not been followed, from what I can tell, and we had to send the budget back for the public process to be followed. Then we got a budget last week that appeared to be unrealistic, and the people who presented on behalf of the organization weren't even in agreement about what would be happening at the organizational level and what would be funded and how it should be funded. There's another layer of concern that I have here, and it goes to what Dick and Dora were just speaking about with respect to the river garden. And I think really what Dick and Dora had to say didn't disagree that much with each other, although they were saying it very differently. I think Dick was saying that the DID money should not be paying for the river garden. And I think Dora was saying the same thing, but in a different way. But the very first budget that was presented to us this year began with a statement that the money that had been used from prior budgets to help fund the river garden was not being included in the budget that was being presented to us. And I thought in previous discussions and previous presentations to this board with respect to funding, the representations that were made to the town was that the money in this budget was not going to fund the river garden. But ultimately it does appear that although representations were made to the town that money raised through the DID was not going to be used to fund the river garden, actually it was. During the coming year, we're going to expect that BABB, as the designated downtown organization, will be coming in front of the board the number of times that I think is reflected in the ordinance, and will be reporting to the board about how the money's being spent and what efforts are being made to support downtown as a whole. I think that the ordinance requires that the efforts of the organization be measured in quantifiable ways in terms of results. And I think it's the responsibility of the organization to determine how its work can be evaluated and to present that to the board, because you're doing the work and you can best provide that explanation to us. And we're going to want to hear that. I'll support the budget now based upon how it's presented, but I will say that Dora's concerns are well taken. The president of the board at the last meeting said, well, we'll just reallocate the money across the line items and come back with the same request. And we clearly could have gotten a budget today that re-examined some of those assumptions and asked for less money, rather than putting big increases into certain line items in order to maintain that $78,000 contribution from the town. And I'll support it for today's purposes, but there's part of me that's troubled about the way in which we appear to have backed into this budget to achieve level funding with the same amount of money being raised from the DID?
I would agree with David wholeheartedly. One of the observations that I've made here is that somehow the organization has been fixated on a certain dollar amount, and rather than decrease that amount, and I think for fear of not, when asking for more money in the future, that it would be turned down. And I can tell you from when the $80,000 was reduced, it was reduced for economic reasons. And in my opinion, the economy hasn't changed around a whole lot since that reduction was asked for. I support some of the things that you have increased here. I definitely believe in the facade program that you've added money for, which I suspect will be sort of like a matching grant program for someone who wants to fix up their building, which I think will go a long way downtown. But David is right on mark when saying, you know, I've always told department heads, don't ask for more, ask for what you need to run your organization. And if that can be and I can trust that, then when you come in and ask for more money for what you need to do or improve on what you're doing, I'm going to be more reticent to say, yes, I agree. But I appreciate the work that you have put into this. It has been a comedy of errors. No one would disagree with that. And I would believe, I'm not going to be here, but listening to David, he has laid out a plan for next year. He will be here with Ken. Dora's concerns are not, I understand her concerns, and I have concerns too. There are people that are talking about the municipality taking over the River Garden. I can tell you unequivocally that we can't afford the River Garden. No different than you. That there's a lot more to it than just a space. So I'm going to support your budget moving forward, and I hope that the rest of the board does too. Christopher?
I think that as far as the vote goes, my remarks aren't going to really change anything. But I do think it's appropriate to say a couple of things. One, speaking as a resident of Brattleboro who wants this all to work, and wants Building a Better Brattleboro to succeed in its mission, wanting very much, because we need to have it to succeed in order to keep downtown competitive and healthy. I disagree slightly with what Dick has said about this being a comedy of errors. What I think, more to the point and perhaps more clearly stated, this has been a crucible and an appropriate one. I think this process has actually been quite good in the interaction between Building a Better Brattleboro and the Select Board. I think that this system has worked really the way it should. There were problems, and what Building a Better Brattleboro has done is respond to the various pressures in putting its budget together over the past few months and come up with a new, more realistic strategy. And for that, I really applaud the Building a Better Brattleboro board in making some difficult choices, but making them firmly and materially, or making very material choices. This is, I think it really should be said and recognized, this is a very good thing. And and this whole conversation, difficult though it's been, has been a very productive crucible. And I firmly disagree with my colleague Dora on the matter of the River Garden. I think that's another kettle of fish for another day, and it's appropriately a separately considered strategic issue. Wrapped up though it is in the history of Building a Better Brattleboro's activity, I will look forward with interest to seeing how this is resolved. It's a sad situation. I wish it were not so. I wish it were supportable, but it is for another day. So my compliments actually to the board for its response to the select board's concerns. I think that the result we're going to see today probably couldn't have been better. The system has worked. I'm proud of everyone involved in town government, and I'm very pleased with how our relationship with the Building a Better Brattleboro board has proceeded. It could have gone in another direction and not have been something we could be satisfied with or pleased with. And what's happening today, I think, is going to be a very good thing and a good base going forward. So,
Thank you. Nora?
Another budget question. You reduced for the literary festival. Did you account for additional rental space, considering that you may not be owning the River Garden at that point? Because that's a big part of the literary festival.
The Literary Festival, we are pretty much the pass-through for the money on the Literary Festival. I mean, we do help them with some administrative things. So where our budget is concerned, what they spend, they raise. You know, I mean, they're equal. So for this case, they've spent and raised $23,000, and if next year they want to spend $24,000, they got to raise the $24,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except that you guys always say that the literary festival is yours, so.
Well, it is. I mean, it started with BABB. And there's a separate committee now that does it, and that money comes through us as the fiscal agent. Does that answer the question? So they can only spend what they raise.
And their history has been $23,000.
I get the history of what's been raised, you know,
I
but
think we're saying it's a wash, that we, you know, it's coming in here, it's expense there, but was your question whether we were including rental income, which we won't be able to receive in the future?
well, no, you know, I guess part of the question was, how were you doing that? Because I was looking at it as being a BABB thing, so that there wouldn't be rental income from that. So to me, I'm looking at it being as an expense if it's a BABB thing. But if you're saying that it's just basically what they, you know, what they raise.
Well, net it comes out, so that, you know, if it wasn't there, you know, it would just be, it would come out zero. And as Kate said, it passes through our account, so that's why it's shown as an expense. Any rental income that would have been earmarked, you know, on the River Garden budget has been removed. So, and again, I don't know if that's connected to your question, but it sounded like it was. But any income that we would have received from that we won't have the ability to receive in the future because we won't own the River Garden, it's not included here as income. I'm not sure I'm answering the question right, but it's what it sounded like you wanted to know.
No, that is what I wanted to know. So just one more thing back to the River Garden, to just elaborate on what I was talking about earlier. The River Garden, actually, the intention was for it to be the Waypoint Center, that it's key for tourists, it's got the public bathrooms. It is vital to the downtown. To separate out the two makes absolutely no sense. The fact that it hasn't been managed well by the organization is another issue. But that was the intent for the River Garden. That's what it's supposed to be. It hasn't necessarily been that. And it's vital as a community center, and it brings business downtown. And if managed correctly, you could have programming and all there all the time to enhance the businesses downtown.
I don't want to get into the River Garden,
No,
but I can
yeah.
just say one quick thing. We're going to be talking about this in the future, and we're going to be coming back to another meeting in the future. What I just want to say, and I don't want to get into this, and I apologize, to say that we have not managed it properly is not an accurate and correct statement. Having said that, we're going to have a public meeting with the public, and we'd like to come back to the select board and have another discussion sometime with the River Garden.
And I would agree with you. I've had my issues with the organization over my time, but the River Garden, it's an economic issue, and the demand for the space and maybe some misprojections in terms of what it was going to cost to run, that's not a bad reflection on the organization. So I would disagree wholeheartedly with Dora in terms of being misrun by the organization. So let's try to keep this in a positive note, and you can have those discussions at the River Garden meeting. Are there any other questions here this morning? I'm not sure I can raise my hand because I think it's frozen to my side. But all those in favor of the motion? Oh, excuse me, John, Mr. Wilmerding.
I think it's probably correct to surmise here that as a nonprofit organization, Building a Better Brattleboro has discerned that the mission element of operating and maintaining the River Garden is different and distinguishable and separable from its central mission as a downtown improvement district organization. And that seems to be what we're seeing reflected here now. The River Garden, I believe, has more than the stated $150,000 in state money which went into the purchase of the land. I believe that there's several $100,000 which went into the construction of the building. And to my mind, just looking at the River Garden, its location, the way it's built, its architecture, the fact that it has public restrooms, it does constitute a de facto community center for our town. So I have remaining an abiding concern that what was built with public funds remain in the public purview and serving the public. As a member of the Finance Committee, I've asked the Town Finance Director, John O'Connor, if we could please get an accurate summation of all the public money which went into the construction of the River Garden. And also, of course, the money which was granted for the land. I just wanted to mention that in passing. The River Garden appears to me to be essential to our community, and I also want to convey one other question from someone who can't be here, Carmen Barrelson, my wife, who's opening an office downtown. She wanted to be able to have lunch in the River Garden, and just to bring her lunch from home there and have lunch, and she thinks many other people like to do that too. We want to see this stay as part of our commons. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to place the $78,000 appropriation for the DID organization. All those in favor on the warning, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do people have time for an executive session, or do you have to run off to work?
I have 10 or 15 minutes.
Do you have 10 minutes?
What kind of matters?
Yeah.
Contractual? Two contractual matters?
I moved to enter executive session to discuss 2 contractual matters where the board has concluded that premature public disclosure will put the town at a substantial disadvantage.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor, and we will be inviting in just Barb.
I invite Barb Sondag into the meeting.
Patrick, too.
And Patrick Moore.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Is there an RSVP involved?